When you're trying to bring an innovative idea to market, there are all of these barriers. And these barriers are often more complicated when your technology is focused on emissions reductions. Innovators face challenges finding funding, finding skilled labor, and navigating complex industry and government systems. And that's before we get to the project itself. Complex projects that integrate new technology are challenging for big companies, let alone for startups. The barriers to innovation and commercialization are everywhere. We here at Emissions Reduction Alberta wanted to better understand and help innovators overcome these barriers, to look at our past investments and to unpack the roadblocks innovators face when bringing new emissions reduction technology to market. Our intention is to make our funding calls more collaborative and to improve the process we use to spark sustainable innovation. ERA partnered with other funding organizations to study these barriers to commercialization, and to do it right, we chose Exergy Solutions to deliver the study. This episode, we're speaking with Samantha Irwin, manager at Exergy Solutions in the Innovation Advisory Group. We dove into what Exergy learned, Samantha's advice for innovators, and we highlighted the ecosystem of universities, accelerators, funders, and industry groups here in Alberta. These organizations help to reduce the barriers to innovation. In this episode, and more episodes to come, we talk about how ERA and our ecosystem partners have market-ready and future solutions that will accelerate technology, drive commercialization, and maximize impact. To start our journey, we begin with laying the foundations for why this study was important, why now, and what did we learn. Our conversation with Samantha Irwin from Exergy Solutions here on Carbon Copy. So can you tell us a little bit about Exergy Solutions?
Yes. So Exergy Solutions is to put it simply, a technology and engineering service provider focused in innovation. And so we break ourselves up into 3 business units that are actually integrated across that TRL scale that a lot of technology developers venture across. So we have our Innovation Advisory Group, and we have an Innovation EPC, and an Innovation Manufacturing Group. And the Innovation Advisory Group is where I play, and that's the space where we help both incumbents, existing large emitters, determine how to decarbonize their existing facilities. So decarbonization strategies, technology evaluations. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we work with technology innovators, and with them, we help them develop their roadmaps to actually get their ideas to a commercial solution. In the Innovation EPC group, that's where we do the building. So your classic EPC, the engineering, procurement, construction services, we provide all those, but we do it for new ideas, things that haven't been done before. And so we start with that blank page and help you design and build to test out your ideas and go through those prototypes, those pilot projects, all the way to that first-of-a-kind commercial deployment.
Do you see sort of the bigger spectrum within there? You have brand new technologies where they're really just in the testing phase, and then are you still actively involved with those technologies as they go through to the commercialization side? Absolutely.
So we like to say that we meet our clients where they're at. And so we've had clients come to us with nothing but an idea. If we want to use the TRL to orientate ourselves, that's 1 or 2. But we've also had some that have gotten their technology to the stage where they've tested it in a lab setting. They've had these smaller prototypes, but now they really need to scale up. And we help them do those things because a lot of them are experienced in the science, but not sure how to execute, not sure how to do that project execution point or part of it. And so we really can help them with that. So,
and then assuming, kind of leading past the TRL scale, so the moment that technology is then proven, it has to be commercialized, which then requires, the major production. And so now you go into a different phase. And so do you support kind of helping them in the manufacturing, industrial engineering kind of phase as well?
Absolutely. Our involvement will maybe shift at that farther end depending on the scale. We can provide engineering and guidance and even the commercial guidance associated with that part of the journey. But if it starts to get more than 50 million type of scale project, then we'll support, but we wouldn't necessarily lead it like we would the previous stages. Yeah.
Maybe you can explain a little bit about your role as the manager of innovation advisory at Exergy.
Yeah, happy to. And you're right. I work more in the front end of the space, in the nebulous, convoluted part where you're still trying to figure out what you need to do to get to commercialization. So I'll speak about two kind of types of clients that I work with. So the small, medium-sized enterprises or the SME innovators, we help them develop their roadmaps. So they know what as far as what they've proven, but not sure how to prove other aspects of their technology, and don't know what to prioritize to get themselves to that commercialization goal. And so we'll help them lay that out. We also provide techno-economic analysis for them and build them a tool that they can use as they progress through their journey to update as they learn more, to understand what aspects of their technology are going to make the biggest difference to the commercial or aspect or the value proposition that they can offer their clients. So that's what we do for those SMEs. On the other side, for our existing large emitters, we help them evaluate technologies. So we help them kind of sift through the noise, as well as go from that high level net zero target and start bringing in some tangible actions that they can take. What equipment can you switch out? What will be the best economic pathway? What are your medium and long-term goals that you can actually achieve to decarbonize your facilities? We have a very skilled group of analysts that are practiced at market analysis, but as well as sifting through the technical aspects of some of these trends that are emerging. And so as a big company, you have a lot of pressure from both shareholders as well as maybe even your own employees to make changes, but you're inundated with many options, but you don't know which ones are real. And so we can help you figure out which ones are real.
Get to the root of the barriers that ERA-funded companies have faced in commercializing, it really was important to us to partner with someone that wasn't just going to do sort of that high-level analysis, but actually had that sort of frontline experience as well. So, kind of taking a step back and looking at the industry as a whole, do you think there's some common misconceptions or narratives around SMEs and their journey to commercialization?
So I don't know if I would call it a clear misconception, but I think there is a tendency to oversimplify the journey and to conflate technology development and SMEs with business startups, because they are different and those journeys are different. But for some of these bright minds that have something they want to bring to market, a new invention to market, while also building a business, they have to balance both those things. And I think that a knee-jerk reaction for people when they hear about some of these companies not succeeding is that, well, they didn't have the skills. They didn't have the skills to do it. If they'd worked hard enough, they would have made it happen. And I think that's missing some very key aspects to their journey, and that not all journeys are the same. You can't compare a company that's trying to do something slightly different than it's done before with a company that's trying to develop a new chemical process and integrate it into an existing facility. Those are wildly different, and they will face wildly different barriers, and one will be harder. And so I think the challenge or the problem with that narrative is that a lot of these new companies face, or they're advised in a way that's placing them into a framework that is not going to work for them. And so it results in them not engaging with the right stakeholders, or not prioritizing, or not doing the right thing first. And they spin their wheels and they burn cash and find themselves, at the end of the road and unable to move forward. And I think if we, don't think all innovation's the same, and as the ecosystem enablers, to really understand at a surgical level what they're trying to achieve, what industry they're in, and the nuances to their technology, we can advise them better and actually create a system that will support them a lot better.
Now that ERA has been supporting companies for quite a long time, 15 years, which is really, Alberta's been incredibly ahead of our time in terms of investing in emissions reducing technologies for well over a decade, when the rest of the world's maybe been doing it for the last 3 to 5 years. And that puts us in a really unique position where we have a base understanding of support that's worked, and maybe some areas where things need to change. But the reason for the barriers to commercialization study was us trying to grapple with that a little bit and trying to assess what are the actual gaps? Are there consistencies in those gaps? Or does every company really just face this barrage of different challenges? And as much as we want to help, there isn't a way to restructure things for ourselves. So the report itself for us was this attempt to kind of look at the historical information that we have, obviously connect with the ecosystem today, look more broadly at the jurisdictions in other parts of the world that are doing things, and really contemplate what could look different, what could be different. And so maybe, from that perspective, for the report's sake, maybe you could kind of at a high level introduce the report for those who might not be familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm pleased to, and I will jump in before I explain it. That is that we sought out to interview 30 different players in the ecosystem. Some of them were technology innovators, or your smaller companies that some had been awarded funding from ERA in the past. Some were facility owner-operators that would either be potential adopters of some of these technologies or have tried to adopt them before and have faced challenges. And the third group was kind of a catch-all of everyone else. So your government funders, we had a couple of venture capitalists we spoke to, and then engineering firms like ourselves to gauge what are they seeing. And what we found was a few things. While there were consistencies, there were differences as far as the perspective. So to be a little simple with it, the innovators said it was the potential adopters that were a problem, and venture capitalists said it was the SMEs that were a problem, and the engineering firms said, it wasn't us, right? But once you started asking more questions, you realized that there was these common trends or forces that were at play, but they were all experiencing them quite differently.
I sort of already mentioned what I thought Exergy brought to the study a little bit earlier. But maybe you can share Exergy's perspective of the barriers to commercialization study.
Sure. So our perspective was one of, at first was to seek to understand. And when we approached the interviews, we developed the questions in a way that did not lead the interviewee, so to speak, and wanted them to tell us their story. So we asked them, that was the first question we asked them, is tell us how your journey's been, and what are some of the things that stand out for you that went well, and what are those wheel spinning moments? Tell us about that. What could have made your path go a little faster? And the conversations were all different. Every single one of them were different. And so when we went back after we'd conducted all the conversations and we were reviewing our notes, we thought, how are we going to identify a concise list of barriers to make it digestible? And so we decided that we would go through and identify root causes and find whether there was patterns in those root causes. And doing it that way actually revealed those trends or forces that I mentioned. And so it was revealing in that we learned about ourselves as well as the ecosystem. We work with SMEs all the time, and we find that it's often frustrating to not be able to do certain work that we know that would help them out because they don't have the funds to do so. But hearing their stories about how challenging it is to have that continuous flow of funds and how challenging it is to get airtime with your potential customers, and how much that actually takes up all of their capacity often. It really sheds another light on how we can help them more. Even if we don't have the funds, is there a way that we can provide some guidance to help them navigate that a little better?
I think one of the unique things about this study is that Exergy has called out what you've deemed the business to project segment and channel. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
The business to project channel actually came out of that analysis of the interview data. So even though in the report it's one of the first things that you'll read as a key concept to understand the rest of the report, it was something that was quite frankly a finding. And it was a finding because we were comparing some companies that had a device, a widget. They had this great success story, but their commercialized version of that was $20,000 to get implemented, and it was a add-on to existing facilities everywhere. And so, you compare that to someone that's trying to design a brand new way to extract oil, and to retrofit existing oil wells to achieve these more efficient processes that you need $100 million to prove out. You just can't. You can't compare those, because it doesn't mean that $100 million case didn't have a value proposition. It means it's just so much harder. And so through that analysis of these different stories, we realized that there really needs to be this business to project concept, where that is the pathway where technology, in order to get commercialized, has to be integrated in a large, complex project. So it's really, instead of selling an add-on from a business to a business, it's about working with your customer, and often many other technology developers, to deliver a project to commercialize and prove that this technology can work at scale. So very different, and those types of pathways require a lot of project financing, and it requires an understanding of regulatory procurement and very sophisticated processes to deliver these projects that are never going to be found in a single firm. And you also need governments to be on board. And so this is when you're in the public to private type of collaboration that's required. And as a small company, you don't have that capability to venture that storm on your own. You need partners. You need people that also have skin in the game, that want this to succeed as well.
Industrial scale carbon capture. North America's first hydrogen-powered locomotives. Using drones for reforestation. Since 2009, Emissions Reduction Alberta has been helping to deliver on the province's environmental and economic goals by investing in projects just like these. Projects that pilot, demonstrate, and deploy clean technologies across our industries. Whether it's detecting methane from space, producing biogas from Alberta's agriculture industry, or one of almost 300 other projects in our portfolio, ERA's investments in these game-changing technologies are reducing emissions, lowering costs, attracting investment, and creating jobs right here in Alberta. ERA's funding is sourced from the Government of Alberta through the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction, or TIER, Fund, which is Alberta's provincial industrial carbon price. For more information about Emissions Reduction Alberta, visit eralberta.ca.
One of the other elements of the study, which I think is really important, is that you've sort of bucketed these things in two ways. One is barriers to demand, and the other is barriers to speed of uptake of these technologies. And the demand side often doesn't get talked about enough, and when it does get talked about, it generally falls back into one of these traditional market segments. So maybe give us your perspective and thoughts on these two areas and the importance of them.
Yeah, the barriers to speed and demand. This grouping came out as we were trying to map where the barriers really cause problems along the journey. And the organizations that were trying to advance their technology between that TRL 3 to 6, their concern was getting funding. Their concern was how slow it was for government funding agencies to actually give them money, or how they have to just keep applying or developing just the different variations of applications to different funders to get the money they need, and they have these big gaps in their in the time when they have funds and when they don't. And so their concern was really regarding the speed, right? How do we move as fast as our investors want us to and as fast as we want to, when the funding process are just not set up that way? They're a little clunky. So that was a key concern for them. Another one that came out of not so much the conversations with the technology innovators, but from others, so from the facility owner operators and the enablers, was this concept of the tech innovators have a lack of skills. And that's a bit of a catch-all, right? Because skills can mean a lot of things, and there's a lot of different skills that one needs to do these things. But a subset of that, I would say, is the challenge with understanding the use case and how to integrate your solution with your customers' systems, right? That part of the skill is one that really does slow them down. Most of those things, the skills as well as the funding processes, can cause a lot of heartache for these companies in those early stages, but they're surmountable to an extent, right? You push through. Those that succeed are definitely those that persevere, and do everything they can to make it happen. But on the other side of the spectrum, there's these ones that we've now called the barriers to demand. And so these become very prevalent at the far end when you're trying to get to that commercialization part, where you're trying to get your technology out and actually making money and reducing those emissions. You can't seem to get past these barriers, because if there is no market pull, if there's no one that wants to buy your service or your product, it will come to a halt. And that leads the question to why. What is causing this lack of market pull? And so the barriers to demand I'll use the titles and then elaborate a little bit, that stand out to me are the undervalued sustainability benefits. So that really is capturing both what governments value sustainability at, as well as what corporations value sustainability at. And this is everything that is not strictly cash. And how do we, have a consistent and reliable way to say that if we do better by the environment, we have to pay for it, and that if you're doing better from the environment, you actually more competitive than those that don't. And so we haven't cracked that nut. We haven't figured that out. And that is a persistent root cause of this lack of market pull. And many of us hear that, government flex or regulatory uncertainty or policy uncertainty is the problem. But that is one and the same, if you ask me. If we were able to say without a doubt that the cost of carbon was going to be this high for the next 50 years, we would see a rapid interest, or a rapidly growing interest in a lot of these clean technologies, and we would see commercialization happen. But the fact is that's not how we work, and so we have to find more creative ways to really drive that market pull.
So beyond, that tech innovator skills gap, is there, and now we've talked about this barriers to demand and barriers to speed piece. Is there any other highlights for you out of the barriers that, something that maybe just stood out to you, or an area that you felt was maybe one you hadn't thought of coming in?
Yeah. So this is following on actually the barriers to demand conversation. One of the ones that I also heard a lot, probably the one that was one of the most mentioned barriers, was this first of a kind risk, which is related to the undervalued sustainability benefits and the issue with government on policy uncertainty. But it is a standalone because as we talk about 100 millions worth of projects, to ask any corporation to take a risk on technology is a big ask, and so everyone wants to be second or third. No one wants to be first, and that. How do you solve that? Right? That is because it's just rational. If it were me, I would also wait and see. To be honest, if it was my money. So how do you do that? And so we need to find, I do mean multiple parties, including governments and banks, lenders, investors, those that are in the financing community. We need to find a way to de-risk the financial part of these projects. So it's not just, taking a technology risk, or so it's only taking a technology risk to an extent, and it's not taking so much of a financial risk. And so I don't have a solution for that. I think that one, really the first step is to get the right people in the room and to talk about this. And do we really want to make a difference here? Because if we do, we need to crack that nut. Otherwise, most of the stuff we'll see will be that smaller dollar value work. Or if we're lucky enough, we see some big corporations be bold and courageous and take that risk, despite the fact that their shareholders are going to pull out. It's a lot to ask for these corporations that need to honor their fiduciary responsibility to take this risk. So leading on to that, the thing that I realized through it was this fact that we've got these undervalued sustainability benefits, this first-of-a-kind risk that's really preventing people from taking the big plunge. And so there aren't many players out there that are willing to do this. So when we're talking about making big differences in greenhouse gas emissions, we're talking massive projects. We're talking multi-billion or multi-hundred million or multi-billion dollar projects. And so we need people with capital and with courage, and we need multiple organizations to step up to do this, because right now the existing incumbents just can't. They're not enabled to by their investors. So we need new players.
I guess within those recommendations, what's the maybe one or two that you would point to that you think would have a really big opportunity to see some change in some of the things we've talked about?
So from the near term, I think we're doing a lot right. But there are ways that we can perhaps improve the flow of funding for some of the companies that are in that early to mid TRL part of their journey. And so, that there's some application process improvements that can be made. But I think working with, if funders can work with each other a little more on how to hand the baton, so to speak. So when an organization has, progressed to a certain extent that now they're no longer in that respective funding agency's mandate, can they work with their partner to pass on this company to the next, so that it's not so laborious and there aren't these big gaps between the stages of these companies? So I think I won't say that's low-hanging fruit, because I do appreciate that's a difficult thing to do, to create these streamlined processes between agencies, but I think it's doable. On the skills and capacity front, we did have a category in the report called skills and capacity building. And we took this from two different lenses. One is we provided a recommendation for embedded advisors. And this we think that fits very well for funders or even venture capital firms, like early venture capital firms, to have embedded advisors in the process with these projects that they're investing in. And so rather than just getting these companies that are receiving the funding to just report on a 6-month basis, be part of their team, sit in their meetings, and provide that guidance. So they know who they could go to. Because that, like you mentioned, one of the things that I found that surprised me about this process is how many people didn't know what services existed. They're like, oh, I wish there was a voucher program that existed. And, we do some digging and we realize that there is. So if we have these embedded advisors as part of the team, they can help them navigate the ecosystem, but they can also provide some commercial and technical guidance to them. On the medium term, in the medium term grouping, I think one of the things that we can really start doing more of is encouraging this industry innovator collaboration. And how do we do that other than just saying, get together? How do you force it? So one of the ideas is similar to, people are familiar with Carbon X Prize, but we could do something slightly different here where we have these industry problem driven challenges where instead of us seeding a whole bunch of great technical ideas and hoping that it finds a problem, we find a problem and we rally those bright minds to find the solution. And the whole intent would be you build that collaboration early on in the technology development journey, and by the time you get to that commercialization stage, you should have less bumps, right? Because you've been with the people that are going to use this technology all the way along. In the strategic or long-term grouping, there's a few there that I know we put them forward knowing that they would be very, very hard. But I'll start with the less hard one first and then go to one of the more radical ideas. So one of the ideas we propose is that we have more technology validation hubs, and you can consider them as ecosystems in their own, little marketplaces in their own, where they have your innovators working alongside each other, where you have supply and demand together. So examples of this to help frame what I mean is we've seen that in BC. They have an integrated marketplace at one of their airports where they have really a place for testing out electrification solutions. Edmonton Airport has the hydrogen initiative that's going on. I know ERA is a supporter of that, and that's an excellent example of what these hubs could look like. And the idea is you provide these real-life field or real facilities that people can test their technologies on, because one of the barriers that these companies have when they reach that point where they want to prove it in a field is finding someone to give them a site, finding someone to actually give them a plot of land and connect to their system. And so if we had more validation sites that were dedicated to specific value chains, I think we would see the innovation happen a little quicker. And then it's connecting these potential customers with the innovators, and it'll help with the enabling demand aspect as well. The more radical one that I wanted to bring up is what we've proposed as project studios. So this is a concept where they would be supported by government, but they would be private companies that were responsible for de-risking technologies and also bringing them together into bigger projects. So they would do the front end work of these mega projects, where one of their main value drivers is, of course, reducing emissions. But you can think of big projects that require new chemical processes, but they also require different electrification solutions all in one. And so these project studios would serve as a vessel that these innovators could come to and say, I have this great idea. I want to own and develop the IP, but the execution of it is overwhelming. I'm not sure how to get it there. And these studios could help de-risk it, do those the pilots, and then at the same time coagulate these ideas into a mega project that could actually commercialize all of them at once. So it's a radical idea, and it would require a lot of funding and a lot of players to be on board, but it might help with the issue with the project execution and getting those stakeholders on board that a lot of these small companies struggle with.
And I guess what I want to also recognize is that there's a team of individuals that probably helped out, and maybe there's a couple of people you wanted to to highlight that were helpful or instrumental in delivering on this project?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Absolutely. So Exergy had their internal team. I was saying just before that I feel like I'm the dumbest person in the room in Exergy because I just work with just brilliant people. But in addition to that, we had some strategic advisors that really helped us with this report on how to approach it, as well as coming up with some of the more thought leadership ideas within it. And so I'd like to, mention Dr. Tima Bensel from the IB Business School at Western University. So she was instrumental in developing our plan to actually evaluate the interview data and then come up with a way to develop recommendations that was digestible. And then Bradley Wombold, he was of Hawk and Squirrel Innovations. He was with us all along. He actually had a hand in developing the report itself and came up with this concept of a B2P early on when we were trying to figure out how to analyze and group all of this information. And that really set us on a great course for the rest of the study. So,
awesome. So as we come down the line here, I guess coming back to maybe Exergy a little bit, can you give us a sense of what Exergy's goals are for the next few years?
Yeah, happy to. So we are in growth mode. So you can consider us a scale up. And what we want to become is the trusted service provider for technology development. We want people to think of us when they're trying to create an idea into something that's real. We want them to come to us, and we want to be their partner and their collaborator in it, not just their engineer that does what they're told. We really do want to help them along the way, both the technical and commercial aspects of their journey. And so we have big plans to expand, and we want to work with anyone that has an idea that they think will change the world.
So do you have any final advice or big thoughts for clean tech innovators that have goals to commercialize their technology?
Don't try to do it yourself. It seems a little self-serving because I just finished saying come to us, but I do mean it honestly. Try to find those that exist in the system already, to leverage their skills, leverage their capacity to make your idea happen. It's hard. I know it's hard when you don't have a lot of money and you're scared to use those dollars that you have on someone else, but it can really help you if you are able to work with someone that knows those pitfalls, that knows how to order your priorities. Then you end up using your dollars more wisely. So that would be one. And the second part would be try not to do too much at once. Invent one thing at a time. Identify what your secret sauce is and hone that. And everything else, the balance of that plant or the balance of the solution, look for the off-the-shelf solutions right away or in the early stages. You can worry about being, a multi-idea inventor further on, but work on the one thing first, and you will get that base business that will then allow you to do more and make a bigger impact. So,
what I tell innovators is, one, they have to show up some of these conferences that are out there, which can be hard to do because you're not in business to go to a conference, but you need to build a network, and you don't have to know everybody. But when you meet one or two people, they will know people. And so, within ERA, within Prairies Can, part of what we'll be doing throughout this series is to kind of introduce more people to the audience. And my advice is to go connect with people like myself, who I don't know everything either. I often myself feel like the dumbest person in the room, but I am connected to people within the ecosystem because I've been in it for a long time, and one of my roles is to pathfind for people. It doesn't always mean that we'll be able to perfectly pathfind for you, but the intention is genuinely there. Based on this study, what would your advice be for the ecosystem partners that were part of the study as well?
I love that you asked me that question. Thank you. So I don't know if it's an appropriate analogy, but I often think of the ecosystem in Alberta similar to a team. And that we've been relatively young and we've been storming a little bit lately, where we don't really know each other's strengths and we don't engage with each other nearly as often as we should. But I think we're ready to start, performing. I think we just need to understand each other's strengths and play to those. And like you said, be that guide or that support in navigating the ecosystem. And so when we come across a company that's trying to make their idea real and they said, oh, I'm struggling with this, we can say, go reach out to so-and-so, go reach out to so-and-so. And so that's the first step. And then the second aspect is us actually collaborating with each other. And I mean real partnerships and finding ways to make the process more seamless so funders can work with each other. But how do investors work with funders? How do investors work with even firms like Exergy, who are constantly working with technology innovators? And we understand which ones are looking really good and which ones are not yet there yet. And I think there's a lot of capacity in the system, but it's underutilized. And so I think the more we can work with each other, and the players, we're talking funders, we're talking engineering firms, we're talking venture capitalists, we're talking the EPC, the innovators themselves, but I'm also talking adopters. So how do we actually rally together and develop real, concrete frameworks that ensure that we're collaborating? And I think that would be my guidance is get together, get the right people together and
Sounds
talk
good.
about how you do that.
So thank you very much, Samantha, for being here with us today. We really appreciate your time and appreciate all the work that Exergy has done on this study. And, it's incumbent upon us. I'm never a fan of a study being the purpose of what we do. The purpose was to learn something. I think what you've offered us in these pages is there's a lot to unpack, not just for ERA, not just for even the ecosystem partners, the numerous ones I mentioned that were part of the study itself. But I actually think there's implications for our university systems to maybe test some of the things that we've talked about here. I do think we have to talk about some of these big ideas and getting some of the big players to the table to discuss what the options are. And so we will be moving a lot of those things forward, and we appreciate all of the effort that was put into this. And thanks for your time today.
Thank you. I was happy to be here.